I stand in affirmation of the resolution resolved. Science leaves no room for free will. I'd like to offer the following definitions to clarify the grounds of this debate and help with the understanding of the resolution. Firstly, as defined by Oxford English Dictionary, science is the activity encompassing the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. Second, Dr. Philosophy Kevin Timp explains free will to say that an agent has free will is to say that the agent has the capacity to choose his or her course of action. Let us understand free will is the capacity unique to persons that allows them to control their actions. Contention 1. Free will is incompatible with physical principles that govern the universe. Because the universe is a closed system, every action is causally determined. Professor Herman Holm from Cornell University goes on to describe how the physical properties of the world preclude the possibility of any action happening without prior determination. He writes, the sum total of physical energy in the world is constant, subject to transformation, but not subject either to increase or diminution. This means that any movement of any body is entirely explicable in terms of antecedent physical conditions. Deeds of the human body are mechanically caused by preceding conditions without reference to intents and purposes. If a state of will, which is mental, caused an act of the body, which is physical, the physical energy of the world increased, which is contrary to the hypothesis universally adopted by physicists. Every action of the universe has a prior cause, and this is the foundation of our epistemology, or a way that we gain knowledge about the world. While it may seem like our own experiences and intuition describe the physical world, it is actually the other way around. Physics can explain both our actions and our experiences. On a more practical basis, one can look at gravity. No matter how much one wills to fly by themselves, their will means nothing as per the principles of physics. Further, the same general principles apply that one only has the ability to take actions defined by the laws of physics, rather than free will. Following further, this is understanding the concept of determinism as a key factor in this debate. Second contention, biology is inconsistent with free will. Professor of Physiology at the University of Oxford, Colin Blakemore, describes the tensions between science and freedom, writing, all our actions and products of the activity of our brains. It makes no sense to try to distinguish between acts that result from conscious intention and those that are pure reflexes or that are caused by disease or damage to the brain. We feel ourselves to be in control of our actions, but that feeling is itself a product of the brain, whose machinery has been designed. The sense of will is an invention of the brain. Any negative arguments about how we intuitively know that we are able to choose freely between different actions needs to take into account Blakemore's idea that our perception of free will is an illusion created by mechanics in our brain. Carrie Smith of the scientific journal Nature describes a neuroscientific study that provides empirical support for this idea. A center for computational neuroscience in Berlin put people into a brain scanner and told them to press a button whenever they felt the urge. The conscious decision to push the button was made about a second before the actual act, but the team discovered that a pattern of brain activity predicted that decision by as many 7 seconds beforehand. Long before the subjects were even aware of making a choice, their brains had already decided. Neuroscientists are raising a new challenge, that consciousness of a decision may be a mere biochemical afterthought with no influence whatsoever on a person's actions. According to this logic, free will is an illusion. And then, finally, my third contention, the scientific discipline of psychology leaves no room for free will. Dr. Rajrat Raghunathan from New York University describes how our actions are determined by a combination of our nature and our nurture, meaning that there are factors that leave us unable to freely make choices. If you think carefully about any decision you have made in the past, you will recognize that all of them were ultimately based on genetic or social inputs to which you had been exposed. And you will also discover that you had no control over these impulses, which means that you had no free will in taking the decision you did. If every action is determined by our previous experiences, we do not have the ability to truly choose between actions. The negative may try to argue that nature and nurture merely influence our range of actions rather than determine them. However, remember that the negative's burden is to show that under the exact same circumstances, we would have the ability to make a different decision. If determinism isn't true, then indeterminism is true, and we still have no free will. Colin McKinn, philosopher from the University of Oxford, explains, either determinism is true or it is not. For these reasons, you should vote for the science's exclusion of free will.
Now on to the con case. I negate. Resolved. Science leaves no room for free will. To offer definition, Kegan-Paul in Ethics and History of Philosophy defines free will as the ability to control one's person in any specific environment. I observe that as the resolution states that science leaves no room for free will, it is the burden of the negative only to prove at least some instance in which science does leave room for free will. Contention 1, humans have evolved to have free will. The evolution of free will began when living things began to make choices. The difference between plants and animals illustrates an early important step. Plants don't need brains to help them decide the course of action. Instinctually, they carry out their lives in a more or less programmed way. Free will is an advanced form of the simple process of controlling oneself, called agency. Roy Baumeister from Slate writes that humans have scientifically evolved to possess advanced skills. All plants and animals in the wild have only two goals naturally, survival and reproduction. However, with the development of civilization, humans' lives were not one-dimensional. Jessica Hall writes on July 1st, 2016, that scientists from Johns Hopkins isolated the part of the brain that controls free will. Research found that the basal ganglia, not found in other animals and organisms' brains, plays an important role in free will. This transformed humans into a species with culture and the ability to engage in diverse forms of labor. Other species do not enjoy the same benefits because they lack the psychological innate capabilities it requires. Our ancestors evolved the ability to act in the ways necessary for culture to succeed. Free will likely be found there, and it is what enables humans to control their actions in precisely the ways required to build and operate complex social systems. Contention 2, the nature of science. As defined by Aon, science is a dynamic, ongoing reconfiguration of knowledge and must be free to change. The fact that science is not always a fact is the very premise on which free will rests. The article continues that the capacity for self-correction is the source of science's immense strength, where the public is unnerved by the fact that scientific wisdom is not immutable. Scientific knowledge changes with great speed and frequency. This leads to two ways in which science allows for free will. First is interpretation. A relevant example is a debate over climate change. Regardless of who's right, the nature of such scientific issues proliferates the discussion on the thought itself, or on the respective topic, which in turn leads to free thought. Baumeister drives an axiom to this in Volume 50 of the Experimental Social Psychology, which focuses on whether we believe or not that we have free will. Put differently, what matters is that we think we are making the choices, regardless of whether our behavior is really uncaused. For Baumeister, behaving or believing that we are free leads us to act as though we are. In this sense, the nature of science proves the perfect ground for the existence of free will. Contention 3, the multiple outcome theory. The many worlds theory proposed by James Everett is the basis of the multiple outcome theory. The fundamental idea of the MWT is that there are a myriad of worlds in the universe in addition to the world we are aware of. In particular, every time a quantum experiment with a different possible outcomes is performed, all outcomes are obtained, each in a different world. From this, take a situation that could have multiple apparent outcomes. If you lose a board game, you have several choices as to what could take place. While some would say science determines you to make one choice, consider what would have happened if the other outcomes played out. Alfred Meal, professor of philosophy at Florida State University, explains this when asking, what if you had been in a slightly better mood and you had decided to donate $40 to a worthy cause instead of just $20? What is needed is a plurality of options, given that just as everything actually was at the time, including your mood, all your thoughts and your feelings, and your brain, your environment, and indeed the entire universe and history. Having been able to make a different decision, if things have been a bit different, is one thing, but having been able to make a different decision in the absence of any prior differences is another. People will have free will because they have the ability to choose one of multiple outcomes, or at least do not have their actions confined to a predetermined set of actions. Please negate. Alright, now on to a 3-minute questioning period, or crossfire.
And I will start it as the affirmative.
Cool.
How would you define a stream of consciousness?
A lot of thoughts.
Would you not say that thoughts lead to another thought?
Sure.
Then wouldn't it make sense that no matter what your mood is, as Dr. Neal said earlier, it will always be dependent on the previous thought?
Yeah, so what defines that previous thought? Is there a cause that causes all the other causes?
Absolutely. It's the factor of determinism. And if you can disprove determinism, then can you prove to me indeterminism?
Well, I'm not just trying to prove indeterminism over here, but wait, let me ask you. Okay, so is modern science correct?
Modern science is the best science that we currently have available.
Okay, so why is it the best science? So what makes it the best science?
Because it has the most study and reliable methods being used today than
Okay,
ever before.
so if at any point the best science is the only science, right? Like
Yes.
the best science is the best at any given point, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so how come? What about like in the 1500s when they thought the Earth was flat? That was still the best science available at that time, right?
The 1500s did not think the Earth is flat. That's a common myth perpetuated.
All right, regardless. So science is still not like a fact, right?
Science is
Like I'm not denying science here, but one can't say that definitively what currently is science is necessarily true, right?
We can say that we might grow in the future. Now, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
When you state that if you're playing a board game, there's a number of different outcomes, aren't all these outcomes determined by how you act in the board game?
Maybe.
Then how can there be a plurality of options if everything's determined
I
on
mean,
how
are you
act?
set to act? How are you decided to act in the board game?
Should it be based on what's most logical?
Who knows? Everyone's logic is different.
Would you say that most people are rational?
No.
Okay, well that concludes our questioning period.
That was a great questioning period, and Bob.